A loyal dog left in the rain. A lonely widow seeking purpose. When Martha rescues Baron, who's really saving whom? Subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. Rain poured down on the outskirts of Mapleton, a close-knit rural town nestled in the rolling hills of Vermont, where maple trees lined the streets, and everyone still waved to passing cars. The harsh April shower drummed against the asphalt of Route 7, the main highway cutting through their sleepy community. Huddled against an abandoned gas station post, a German shepherd sat motionless, his fur soaked and matted against his once powerful frame. The dog's eyes, amber pools reflecting years of devotion, stared vacantly down the road where his family's SUV had disappeared hours earlier. His tags jingled softly with each shiver that ran through his body. 10 years of loyalty, of protecting children who had grown from toddlers to teenagers, of guarding the house while they slept, all abandoned with 4 simple words from his owner: "We can't take him." Martha Winters, 68, with silver hair tucked beneath a plastic rain bonnet, clutched her hymnal closer to her chest as she hurried along the sidewalk toward First Presbyterian. She'd been the town's head librarian for over 40 years before retiring last fall, and even now, she couldn't break her Sunday routine, rain or shine. "Dear Lord," she muttered, noticing movement near the old Phillips 66 station. "What in heaven's name?" The dog's whimper was almost imperceptible beneath the rainfall, but Martha's ears, trained by decades of shushing noisy teenagers, caught it immediately. She approached cautiously, her orthopedic shoes splashing through puddles. "Hello there," she called softly. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The dog raised his head slowly, revealing eyes that made Martha's heart clench. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror after Thomas had passed from his heart attack 2 years prior. It was the hollow gaze of someone who had lost everything. Tied to the post with a frayed leash, a soggy cardboard sign leaned against the wall: "Free dog. Moving overseas. Can't take him." The handwriting was hasty, almost apologetic. "They left you," Martha whispered, her voice breaking. "After how many years?" 10, 12. She knelt despite her arthritic knees and held out her hand. "My stars, you're soaked to the bone." The dog sniffed her fingers cautiously, then dropped his head again, as if too heartbroken to hope. Martha Winters had never considered herself impulsive. Her children, Michael in Boston and Jennifer in Chicago, often teased that she planned her spontaneity 2 weeks in advance. But something about this abandoned soul called to her own loneliness. "I don't know the first thing about dogs," she admitted aloud, "but I do know about being left behind." With trembling fingers, she untied the leash. The German shepherd stood uncertainly, his legs stiff from hours of immobility. "I'm Martha," she said, surprising herself with the decision forming in her mind. "And you?" "Well, I think you look like a ranger to me. Strong, dependable." She gently stroked his wet head. "What do you say, Ranger? Would you like to come home with me instead of sitting here in this awful rain?" The dog studied her face with an intelligence that startled her. Then, ever so slightly, he leaned against her leg, a silent acceptance of her offer. Church bells chimed in the distance, but for the first time in 40 years, Martha Winters would not be in her usual pew. She had found something far more sacred on this rainy Sunday morning, a second chance for both of them. Martha's small craftsman home on Elm Street had been built in the 1930s and had weathered nearly a century of Vermont seasons with dignified grace. Inside, the orderly bookshelves that lined the walls told the story of a life dedicated to literature and organization. As she guided Ranger through the front door, Martha suddenly saw her immaculate space through new eyes. The antique Persian rug passed down from her mother, the delicate porcelain figurines arranged on the mantel, the precisely folded throw blankets, none of it designed for a large, soaking wet German shepherd. "Well," she said, removing her rain bonnet, "this will certainly be an adjustment for both of us." Ranger stood uncertainly on the welcome mat, water pooling beneath him, his body rigid with the caution of a creature unsure of his welcome. His eyes darted around the unfamiliar surroundings, but he didn't move a muscle. "It's all right," Martha assured him softly. "You can come in. This is home now." The word caught in her throat. Since Thomas died, the house had been merely a place she existed, filled with memories but devoid of present joy. Home was something else entirely. Martha led Ranger to the bathroom, where where she awkwardly attempted to dry him with her good towels, the ones reserved for guests who rarely visited anymore. "My children are going to think I've lost my mind," she told him as she worked the towel over his fur. "Jennifer will probably drive up from Boston this weekend to stage an intervention." As if understanding her words, Ranger let out a soft whine. "No, no," Martha hastily corrected. "Don't you worry. You're staying right here. I may be old, but I'm still perfectly capable of making my own decisions." The phone rang just as she was filling a mixing bowl with water, the only container large enough for a dog his size. Martha answered to hear her son Michael's voice. "Mom, Mrs. Peterson said you weren't at church today. Are you sick?" Martha took a deep breath. "Michael, I've adopted a dog." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "I'm sorry, did you say you got a dog?" "You." "Yes, a German Shepherd. Someone abandoned him by the highway. His name is Ranger." "Mom, do you know anything about caring for a dog? Especially one that big? They need exercise, training. I raised 2 children, didn't I? I think I can handle one dog." Martha's tone carried a finality that her son recognized from childhood. "Besides, we need each other." After finishing the call and promising to be careful, Martha prepared a makeshift bed from old blankets in the corner of her living room. She watched as Ranger circled 3 times before settling, his eyes never leaving her. "Are you hungry?" she asked, suddenly realizing she had nothing appropriate to feed him. She rummaged through her refrigerator and found leftover meatloaf. "This will have to do for tonight." As she placed the plate before him, Ranger didn't immediately eat. Instead, he looked at her face as if seeking permission. "Go ahead," Martha encouraged. "It's for you." Only then did he carefully, almost politely, begin to eat. That night, Martha lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another living being in her home. The occasional sigh, the shifting of weight. Around midnight, a thunderclap shook the windows, and seconds later, she heard Ranger's panicked whimper followed by the click of his nails on the hardwood floor. "Ranger," she called softly. His large shape appeared in her doorway, trembling visibly. "Oh dear, you're afraid of storms, aren't you?" Martha patted the edge of her bed, something she'd never imagined doing. "Just for tonight." The dog hopped up with surprising grace for his size and curled against her feet. The solid warmth of him was oddly comforting. "We're quite the pair, aren't we?" Martha whispered into the darkness. "Both of us starting over at our age." As if in response, Ranger let out a contented sigh that seemed to say, perhaps this new beginning was exactly what they both needed. The morning sunlight filtered through Martha's lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across her quilt. For the first time in months, she hadn't woken before her alarm. Instead, she opened her eyes to find Ranger sitting perfectly erect beside her bed, watching her with focused attention. "Good heavens," she gasped, momentarily startled before remembering yesterday's impulsive rescue. "You gave me quite a fright, Ranger." The clock read 7 a.m. exactly. Martha noticed with curiosity that Ranger wasn't just awake. He was alert, positioned as if awaiting instructions, his ears perked forward and body tense with anticipation. "Do you need to go outside?" she asked, reaching for her robe. Martha hadn't ventured into her backyard much since Thomas passed. The garden he'd lovingly tended had become overgrown, the bird feeders empty. As she opened the back door, Ranger bolted past her, not to relieve himself as she expected, but to circle the perimeter of the yard with military precision, checking every corner before returning to her side. "Well, aren't you thorough?" she remarked, bemused. After a quick breakfast, during which Martha realized her grocery list would need significant revisions to include dog food, she decided her new companion needed a proper bath. The rain had removed the worst of the dirt, but his coat remained dull and matted in places. "Come now," she coaxed, leading him to the bathroom. "Let's make you presentable." The bathing process revealed Ranger's first peculiarity. When Martha experimentally said, "Sit," he showed no reaction. Yet when she accidentally knocked over a bottle of shampoo and exclaimed, "Skice," a German expletive her grandmother had often used, Ranger immediately sat at attention. "You understand German?" Martha asked, surprised. She reached deep into her memory for the German phrases her immigrant grandmother had used. "Platz," she tried tentatively. Ranger immediately laid down in the tub. "How extraordinary," Martha whispered. As she worked the tangles from his fur, her fingers found something unexpected, a metal tag wedged against his skin, hidden beneath layers of matted hair. Unlike his standard rabies vaccination tag, this one was made of stainless steel with a series of numbers and letters stamped onto it, partially worn away. It didn't look like any pet identification she'd ever seen. The doorbell's chime interrupted her investigation. Ranger immediately tensed, a low growl building in his throat. "It's all right," Martha soothed, though her own heart had lurched at the unexpected sound. She wrapped Ranger in a towel and went to answer the door. Fire Chief Robert Sanderson stood on her porch, his expression concerned. At 6'3" with broad shoulders and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, he was an imposing figure in his uniform. "Morning, Martha. Heard you weren't at church yesterday. Everything okay?" Behind the professional inquiry lay personal concern. Robert had been Thomas's best friend for 30 years. Before Martha could answer, Ranger appeared at her side, hackles raised, his body positioned protectively between Martha and the uniformed visitor. "Whoa there," Robert said, taking a step back. "Didn't know you had a dog." "It's a recent development," Martha explained, placing a steadying hand on Ranger's back. "This is Ranger. I found him abandoned yesterday." Robert's eyes narrowed as he studied the dog. "That's a working dog if I ever saw one. Military or police trained, I'd bet my pension on it." "What makes you say that?" "The way he's positioned himself between us. The alertness. And look at that scar on his flank. That's not from ordinary rough play." Robert crouched down, maintaining eye contact with Ranger. "Handsome fellow. Mind if I come in? I'd like to take a closer look at him." Martha hesitated, noting Ranger's continued tension. "Perhaps another time, Robert. We're still getting acquainted." After Robert left, promising to bring some proper dog supplies later, Martha returned to examining the mysterious tag. She carefully photographed it with the digital camera her granddaughter Abby had insisted she learn to use. Later that afternoon, as Ranger sat vigilantly by the front window, positioned to observe the entire street, Martha noticed he became intensely alert at exactly 3:45 p.m. Seconds later, an ambulance sped past her house, sirens blaring. Ranger's reaction was immediate and visceral. He began pacing anxiously, whining softly. "You know that sound, don't you?" Martha murmured. "Were you a rescue dog, Ranger? Is that why you watch the road so carefully every morning at 7? Ranger turned his intelligent eyes toward her, as if willing her to understand the story he couldn't tell. In that moment, Martha made a decision. "Well then," she said firmly, "I suppose we have a mystery to solve." Martha had spent 40 years helping people find answers. Whether it was a third-grader science project or a doctoral candidate's thesis research, she'd always believed that enough determination and the right resources could solve any mystery. Now, sitting at her rarely used computer with a notepad beside her, she was determined to uncover Ranger's past. "All right, let's approach this systematically," she said to Ranger, who lay at her feet with his eyes tracking her every movement. "First, we document what we know." She began listing observations, responds to German commands, reacts to sirens, performs perimeter checks, vigilant at 7 a.m. daily, military-style tag, fear of thunderstorms, wariness of uniformed men. The tag was her best lead. Martha squinted at the photograph she'd taken, trying to make out the faded markings. K9, USF, 217, followed by what appeared to be FEMA and another series of digits. FEMA, Martha murmured. Federal Emergency Management Agency? That would explain the disaster response behavior. Her doorbell rang again, causing Ranger to spring to his feet. This time, Martha was pleased to see her granddaughter Abby on the porch, her bright blue hair a stark contrast to her white medical scrubs. "Grandma, I came as soon as I got Mom's panicked text about you adopting a potentially dangerous animal," Abby announced, then froze when she spotted Ranger. "Whoa, he's gorgeous." Unlike her reaction to Chief Sanderson, Ranger approached Abby with cautious curiosity, sniffing her extended hand before allowing her to scratch behind his ears. "He likes you," Martha observed with surprise. "Animals usually do," Abby replied with a shrug. "Part of why I'm in vet school." She knelt to examine Ranger more closely. "He's definitely purebred, probably about 11 or 12 years old. This boy's seen some action. Look at these scars." Martha showed Abby the mysterious tag. "I'm trying to trace his background. Could you help me with the computer research? You know I'm hopeless with anything beyond basic email." Abby's fingers flew across the keyboard with a speed that Martha found both impressive and slightly alarming. Let's try searching these identifiers. K9, USF, 217 FEMA. After several minutes of clicking and typing, Abby let out a triumphant bingo. She turned the screen toward Martha, displaying a 5-year-old news article. The headline read, FEMA Task Force Heroes. Human and canine partners save lives after Hurricane Maritza. Among the photographs was one showing a younger, healthier ranger alongside a tall, lean firefighter with kind eyes. Specialist Jason Miller and his K9 partner Baron responded to over 20 locations, successfully locating 9 survivors in the aftermath, Abby read aloud. Baron, not Ranger. And look, it says they were with the Vermont Urban Search and Rescue Task Force. Martha studied the photograph. That's definitely him. Baron. She corrected herself softly, testing the name. The dog's head snapped up, his ears alert. You remember, Martha whispered. Abby scrolled through more search results. There's not much else here. These teams are deployed nationally for disasters, though. Earthquakes, hurricanes, building collapses. No wonder he reacts to sirens. Martha's phone rang. Jennifer, calling for their daily check-in. Martha braced herself for her daughter's inevitable concern. Mom, Michael told me about this dog situation. Jennifer began without preamble. I'm worried about you. A large rescue dog isn't appropriate for someone your age. What if he's aggressive? What if he knocks you down? Martha's spine stiffened. Baron, that's his actual name, is a highly trained rescue dog who saved lives. He's been abandoned by his family, and I won't abandon him again. Baron. Jennifer sounded confused. You've already learned more about him? Abby is helping me research his background. He was partnered with a firefighter named Jason Miller in the Federal Emergency Response System. Jennifer sighed. Mom, this is exactly what worries me. You're getting attached, creating this whole narrative. It's not a narrative, it's research, Martha interrupted sharply. Facts, Jennifer. The librarian's specialty. After ending the call with a promise to be careful, Martha turned to Abby. Can we find this Jason Miller? Maybe he knows why Baron was abandoned. Abby's expression grew serious. Grandma, that article was from 5 years ago. A lot could have happened since then. What if his handler died? That would explain why Baron ended up with another family who eventually abandoned him. Martha hadn't considered this possibility. She looked at Baron, noting the profound sadness that seemed to linger in his eyes despite his newfound security. Either way, Martha decided, we owe it to him to find out. He protected people for years. Now it's our turn to protect him. As if understanding her words, Baron placed his head gently on Martha's knee, his amber eyes meeting hers with an expression of trust that made her throat tighten with emotion. We'll find your story, she promised, stroking his head. Every good book deserves its proper ending. The Mapleton Community Center had seen better days. Its brick facade was weathered by decades of Vermont winters, and the American flag out front had become slightly frayed at the edges, much like the town itself. Martha had avoided the place since Thomas's passing. It held too many memories of charity bake sales and anniversary dances. But today, she had a purpose that overrode her reluctance. The Thursday senior social starts at 10 a.m., she told Baron as she attached his newly purchased leash. If anyone in town knows about local firefighters or FEMA volunteers, it will be Harriet Fleming. That woman has cataloged every piece of Mapleton gossip since the Johnson administration. Baron sat patiently as Martha fussed with her appearance, applying a touch of lipstick and adjusting her cardigan. It would be her first social outing in nearly a year. They're going to stare, she warned him. Are you ready for that? Baron's steady gaze seemed to say he'd faced far worse than curious seniors. The 5-block walk to the center took longer than it once had. Martha's arthritic hip protested, but Baron matched his pace perfectly to hers, staying vigilantly at her side. As they approached the building, they passed the volunteer fire station next door, where 2 firefighters were washing a truck. Baron immediately tensed, his attention locked on the scene. Interesting, Martha noted. You recognize the environment. Inside the community center, conversations halted as Martha entered with Baron. 20 pairs of elderly eyes widened in surprise. Martha Winters, Harriet exclaimed, hurrying over. We've missed you these past months. And who is this handsome fellow? Before Martha could answer, Dot Wilson gasped dramatically. Martha got a dog? The woman who once complained that the library fish tank was too much responsibility. Nervous laughter rippled through the room as Martha guided Baron to an empty corner table. "This is Baron," she explained as several curious seniors approached cautiously. "He's a retired search and rescue dog who needed a home." Within minutes, the novelty of Martha's unexpected companion transformed into a flurry of questions and unsolicited advice. "German Shepherds need at least 2 hours of exercise daily," warned Ed Peterson, the retired high school track coach. "My nephew's dog ate a sock and needed a $2,000 surgery," added helpfully. Martha fielded their concerns with practiced patience, the same tone she'd used with overeager parents at school board meetings. Throughout it all, Baron remained dignified, accepting gentle pats from arthritic hands with stoic grace. Finally, Martha steered the conversation toward her true purpose. "I'm trying to locate someone who might have information about Baron's background. A firefighter named Jason Miller who worked with FEMA and the Vermont Urban Search and Rescue Task Force." Harriet's expression changed. "Jason Miller? Poor soul." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Had a terrible accident about 3 years ago. Building collapsed during a training exercise. Spinal injury, if I recall correctly." Martha's heart sank. "Is he dead?" "No, but Ruth Simmons. You remember Ruth? She volunteers at the hospital in Burlington. She told me he was transferred to a long-term rehabilitation center somewhere out west. Colorado, perhaps? His brother managed his affairs afterward." The pieces began falling into place. "So his dog would have gone to family members," Martha murmured. "Most likely. Though if what happened to your Baron is any indication, they weren't particularly responsible." Harriet's disapproval was palpable. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion as the building's ancient heating system emitted a deafening metallic clang, followed by an ominous rumbling from the ceiling. Several seniors gasped, but it was Baron's reaction that caught everyone's attention. The German Shepherd was instantly alert, head raised, ears forward. When a second, louder bang sounded and a small shower of ceiling plaster dusted down near the emergency exit, Baron sprung into action. He circled the area, sniffing intently, then stood beneath the damaged section, looking back at Martha with urgent purpose. "I think he's trying to tell us something," Martha said, rising from her chair. "Nonsense," Ed scoffed. "It's just the old boiler acting up again." But Baron's behavior was too deliberate to ignore. Martha approached the area he indicated, noticing a growing crack along the ceiling. With surprising authority, she addressed the room. "I believe we should evacuate immediately. Baron is trained to recognize structural instabilities." Some seniors rolled their eyes, but Harriet, president of the social committee and de facto leader, took one look at Baron's intense focus and nodded. "Better safe than sorry. Everyone, please proceed calmly to the main entrance." They had barely cleared the room when a section of the ceiling collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending dust and debris across the space they'd occupied moments before. Outside, the seniors stared in shock at the building, then at Baron, who had returned to Martha's side as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "That dog just saved us from potential injury," Harriet declared, her voice trembling slightly. Chief Sanderson arrived minutes later with his crew, securing the area and examining the damage. "Structural deterioration from water damage," he explained to the gathered seniors. "Building's been needing repairs for years. Budget cuts." He turned to Martha with newfound respect. "How did you know to evacuate?" Martha nodded toward Baron. "He knew. He was trying to warn us." The chief crouched to Baron's level, studying him with professional interest. "Impressive work, boy." To Martha, he added, "I'd like to talk more about your dog when things settle down. A trained search animal like this. Well, we haven't had a K9 unit since Rex retired last year. Could be valuable to the community." As they walked home, Martha noticed the way neighbors stopped to watch them pass, whispers following in their wake. By evening, her phone was ringing constantly with calls from concerned children and curious townspeople. "You've caused quite a stir," she told Baron as they settled in for the night. "Though I suspect that's nothing new for you." Baron rested his head on her lap, his eyes conveying a wordless understanding. In the quiet of her living room, Martha felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas died, a sense of purpose, of being genuinely needed. "Good boy," she whispered, her fingers gently tracing the scars that mapped his history of service. "Very good boy." Martha woke to the sound of her phone ringing. The digital clock read 6:17 a.m., Too early for casual calls. With Barron alert beside her, she fumbled for the receiver. Martha? It's Robert. Chief Sanderson's voice carried an unusual excitement. Turn on your TV. Channel 5 News. Now. Bewildered, Martha reached for her glasses and shuffled to the living room, Barron following closely. She hadn't watched morning television since Thomas died. Their ritual of coffee and weather reports had felt too painful to continue alone. The remote felt unfamiliar in her hands as she pressed the power button. Remarkable scene yesterday at the Mapleton Community Center, the perky news anchor was saying, where a senior citizens gathering was saved from potential disaster by an unlikely hero, a rescued German shepherd with a mysterious past. Martha gasped as amateur footage filled the screen. Someone had recorded Barron's warning behavior and the subsequent evacuation, moments before the ceiling collapsed. The caption beneath the video read, "Canine Hero, Abandoned Rescue Dog Saves Seniors." "I don't understand," Martha murmured. "How did they get this?" As if answering her question, the camera cut to Abby, her blue hair unmistakable. "My grandmother rescued him just days ago," she was telling the reporter. "He was abandoned after years of service as a FEMA search and rescue dog. We're still trying to piece together his full story." Martha sank onto the sofa, stunned. "Oh, Barron, what have we gotten ourselves into?" The segment continued with Chief Sanderson discussing the building's structural issues and the fortunate presence of a trained detection dog. The reporter concluded with the tagline, "From abandoned to hero, the remarkable second chance story captivating this small Vermont town." Before Martha could process what was happening, her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw not one but 3 news vans parked along Elm Street, and a young woman with a microphone standing on her porch. "Mrs. Winters? I'm from Channel 7 News. We'd love a statement about your heroic dog." Martha backed away from the door, heart racing. "This is preposterous," she told Barron, who seemed equally alarmed by the commotion. The phone rang again, Jennifer this time. "Mom, you're on television. In Boston. They're calling Barron a senior saving superdog. Are you okay? Do you need me to come up?" "I'm fine, Jennifer," Martha assured her, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise. "Just a bit overwhelmed. Put the chain on your door and don't talk to reporters without thinking it through," Jennifer advised, her public relations experience surfacing. This could get intense quickly. By noon, Martha's quiet life had been thoroughly upended. Her answering machine filled with messages from distant relatives, former library patrons, and 3 different television producers. Someone had left flowers on her porch with a card reading, "Thank you, Barron." Neighbors drove by slowly, hoping for a glimpse of the canine celebrity. A sharp knock cut through the chaos. Chief Sanderson at the back door, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry about this circus, Martha. Small-town news got picked up by the national feeds. Slow news day, I guess." He glanced at Barron, who had retreated to Martha's side, overwhelmed by the attention. "Mind if I come in?" Back way was clear of reporters. Over coffee at Martha's kitchen table, Robert explained his unexpected visit. "Our department's been struggling with mountain rescues. Tourism's up in the national forest, but our resources are stretched thin. After yesterday, well, I've been authorized to discuss establishing a K9 unit. With Barron as our cornerstone." Martha frowned. "You want to take him?" No, Robert quickly clarified. "We'd want both of you. He clearly trusts you. We could provide training for you to work as a team during callouts. Nothing too strenuous, mostly having him available when needed." Martha stared into her coffee cup, conflicted. "I'm 78 years old, Robert. Hardly search and rescue material." "Age is just a number," he countered. "You're sharper than half my crew. Besides, Barron's training is already complete. You'd just need to learn the handling commands." Their conversation was interrupted by another knock. Abby this time, slipping through the back door with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about the news thing, Grandma. I just answered a few questions after the ceiling collapse. I had no idea it would blow up like this." Martha sighed. "It's not your fault, though I would have appreciated some warning before seeing myself mentioned on television." Abby's expression brightened as she noticed Chief Sanderson. "Did you tell her about the shelter idea yet?" "I was getting to that," Robert replied. "What shelter idea?" Martha asked suspiciously. Abby pulled out her tablet, showing Martha a social media page that had appeared overnight. Barron's Buddies, Second Chances for Service Animals. People are so moved by Baron's story that donations are pouring in, Abby explained excitedly. The fire department has that unused storage building behind the station. Robert thinks we could convert it into a small shelter specifically for retired service animals, dogs, horses, even therapy animals that need rehoming. Using Baron's sudden fame for something meaningful, Robert added. This town's always needed a proper animal shelter. Martha felt simultaneously overwhelmed and oddly exhilarated. A week ago, she'd been a lonely widow whose biggest daily decision was which mystery novel to read next. Now she was fielding television requests and discussing search and rescue operations. What would this mean for Baron? She asked cautiously. He stays with you, Robert assured her. But he'd have purpose again. Purpose is important at any age. The knowing look he gave Martha made it clear he wasn't just talking about the dog. As if understanding the gravity of the conversation, Baron moved to sit between them, his intelligent eyes moving from one face to another. You miss it, don't you? Martha asked him softly. The work. The purpose. Baron's tail thumped once against the floor, a quiet affirmation. Martha straightened her shoulders, making a decision that surprised even herself. Well then, I suppose we'd better clear those reporters off my lawn and give them something substantial to report. If we're going to be famous, we might as well use it for something worthwhile. For the first time in years, the spark of adventure lit Martha's eyes, a reflection of the same determined spirit that had once led her to march for civil rights in her youth and later champion literacy programs in rural communities. Baron and I, she announced with newfound confidence, are ready to serve. 2 weeks after Baron's moment of heroism, Martha's living room had transformed into an impromptu command center. A folding table held stacks of donation forms for Baron's buddies, while the couch was typically occupied by either Abby updating the shelter's social media pages or Robert discussing renovation plans for the storage building. Baron supervised it all from his new orthopedic bed, a gift from the local pet store. The contractor can start work next Monday, Robert announced, studying blueprints spread across Martha's coffee table. We've raised enough for the basic renovations, but we'll need another fundraising push for medical equipment. Martha nodded absently, her attention fixed on the mail she was sorting. Most were cards and letters addressed to Baron, children's crayon drawings, thank you notes from seniors at the community center, even a certificate of recognition from the mayor. But one envelope stood out, heavy cream stationery with a Denver, Colorado postmark. This is odd, she murmured, carefully opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter on hospital letterhead. Dear Mrs. Winters, my name is Jason Miller. Until 3 years ago, I was a firefighter and FEMA rescue specialist partnered with a German shepherd named Baron. I recently saw a news segment about your heroic dog and recognized him immediately. I can't adequately express what I felt seeing Baron again, alive, healthy, and still saving lives. After my accident, I was told Baron had been rehomed with my brother's family. I've spent the past 2 years in rehabilitation centers, first in Vermont, then here in Colorado, where specialized treatment was available. Communication has been limited, and my brother stopped responding to my inquiries about Baron months ago. I'm writing not to disrupt the beautiful bond you clearly share, but simply to express my profound gratitude that Baron found someone who recognizes his true worth. He was more than a working dog to me. He was my partner, my best friend, and often my salvation during the darkest moments of difficult rescues. If you're amenable, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. My physical therapy is progressing well, and my doctors believe I may be able to travel independently within the next few months. With deepest respect and gratitude, Jason Miller, a phone number and email address followed the signature. Martha's hands trembled as she set down the letter. Baron, sensing her distress, immediately came to her side, resting his chin on her knee. It's your Jason, she whispered, stroking Baron's head. He's alive. Robert and Abby exchanged concerned glances as Martha explained the letter's contents. This complicates things, Robert said carefully. Complicates? Martha echoed. It's wonderful news. Baron wasn't abandoned callously. He was essentially stolen from someone who loved him. Abby's expression remained troubled. But Grandma, what if he wants Baron back? Legally, if he can prove ownership. The thought struck Martha like a physical blow. In just 3 weeks, Baron had become the center of her world. The idea of losing him left her feeling hollow. I have to call him, Martha decided, reaching for the phone before she could lose her nerve. The number rang 3 times before a warm, slightly raspy voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Miller? This is Martha Winters. I received your letter about Barron." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Mrs. Winters, thank you for calling. Is he there with you now?" "Yes, right beside me. Would you mind putting the phone near him? Just for a moment." Martha held the receiver toward Barron, who tilted his head curiously. "Barron? Buddy, it's me." Jason's voice cracked with emotion. "Es ist dein Partner." Barron's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. He whined loudly, pawing at the phone, his entire body trembling with recognition. When Martha returned the phone to her ear, both she and Jason were crying. "He remembers you," she said unnecessarily. "I never stopped looking for him," Jason replied. "My brother told me he'd found Barron a good home with a family moving to Florida. I've been trying to track them down for months." "He was abandoned tied to a post in the rain," Martha said, unable to keep the anger from her voice. The note said they were moving overseas. Jason's sharp curse made it clear this was news to him. "I'm so sorry. Daniel, my brother, he was supposed to care for Barron until I recovered enough to take him back. We had a falling out over my medical decisions, and after that, he stopped bringing Barron to visit me at the rehab center." Martha's librarian instincts kicked in. Facts needed verification. "Can you tell me Barron's full service record? As proof that you're really his handler." Without hesitation, Jason detailed Barron's training history and the disasters they'd responded to together: hurricanes in Florida and Texas, an earthquake in California, building collapses in Maryland and Pennsylvania. He described Barron's distinctive behaviors: the 7 a.m. perimeter checks that coincided with their daily training time, his fear of thunderstorms that had developed after a particularly harrowing hurricane deployment, and the unique way Barron communicated when he'd found a survivor. He presses his front paws into the ground 3 times and gives a single bark. It's not standard training. It's just something he developed on his own. It was undeniably Barron's behavior during the community center incident. "Mr. Miller, Jason, please." "Jason, what are your intentions regarding Barron?" Martha forced herself to ask the question directly, dreading the answer. A heavy silence followed. "I've missed him every day," Jason finally admitted. "He was my family. But Mrs. Winters, I also recognize what you've done for him, and what he's clearly done for you. I'm not going to demand his return and rip him away from another home." Relief flooded through Martha, followed quickly by guilt. This man had lost everything: his career, his mobility, and his loyal partner. Yet he was considering her feelings. "I'm completing my final round of intensive therapy," Jason continued. "The doctors are optimistic about my recovery. I won't need the wheelchair much longer, though I'll always have some limitations. I've been offered a position training new handlers for the FEMA program, a desk job mostly, but still connected to rescue work." "Where would this position be?" Martha asked cautiously. "That's the thing, I have options. The main training center is in Virginia, but there's a satellite facility being developed in Burlington that needs an experienced trainer." After seeing that news segment about Barron, "Well, I've been considering the Vermont option more seriously." The implications hung between them. Jason could be nearby, could be part of Barron's life again without taking him away. "I think," Martha said slowly, choosing her words with care, "that Barron would benefit greatly from having both of us in his life. And perhaps our town's new shelter initiative could benefit from someone with your expertise." When she hung up 30 minutes later, having made arrangements for a video call the following day, Martha found herself facing the concerned faces of Robert and Abby. "Well," Abby prompted anxiously. Martha smiled through her tears. "We're going to find a way to make this work. For all of us." That night, as Martha prepared for bed, she noticed Barron sitting alertly by the window, watching the road with vigilant eyes. "He might come back to Vermont," she told him softly. "You're Jason. Would you like that?" Barron's tail thumped against the floor, once, twice, 3 times, the closest thing to joy Martha had seen from him yet. The Burlington Airport arrivals area buzzed with the usual Friday afternoon activity: business travelers returning home, college students arriving for campus visits, tourists eager to experience Vermont's famous fall foliage. Martha sat rigidly on an uncomfortable plastic chair, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her best cardigan. "Stop fidgeting, Grandma," Abby said gently. "You look fine." Barron, wearing his new service vest, complete with retired search and rescue patches, sat perfectly still beside Martha's chair, but his eyes never left the escalator from the terminal. The past month had been a whirlwind of video calls with Jason, shelter preparations, and heated family discussions. Jennifer had flown up from Boston convinced the entire situation was either a scam or evidence of her mother's declining judgment. This man could be anyone, she'd argued during a tense dinner. He sees Barron on the news, claims to be his handler, and suddenly he's moving to Vermont? It's suspicious. We verified his identity, Martha had countered firmly. The FEMA credentials, the hospital records, the service history, it all checks out. Robert had helped investigate Jason's background, confirming both his service record and the circumstances of his injury. Even Jennifer had reluctantly admitted the evidence was compelling, though she remained protective. I'm going with you to meet him, she'd insisted before returning to Boston. I'll read his body language, see how Barron reacts. If anything feels off, we're leaving immediately. Now, watching her normally composed mother nervously checking her watch every 30 seconds, Jennifer softened. Mom, whatever happens today, you've given Barron an incredible second chance. Remember that. Martha nodded, too anxious for words. After 3 weeks of daily video calls, she'd grown to respect Jason Miller. His dedication to Barron was unquestionable, his knowledge of search and rescue impressive, and his gentle manner reassuring. But theory and practice were different matters. Today would determine whether their idea of sharing Barron was a compassionate fantasy or a practical possibility. The arrival board updated. Flight 242 from Denver had landed. He's here, Martha whispered. 20 minutes later, the escalator delivered a steady stream of passengers into the arrivals area. Martha scanned each face anxiously until she spotted him, a lean man in his late 30s, propelling himself forward with forearm crutches. His movements were measured but determined, evidence of hard-won recovery. Barron, who had been the perfect picture of canine discipline, suddenly stiffened. His nose worked frantically, testing the air. Then, before anyone could react, he let out a high-pitched whine unlike any sound Martha had heard from him before. Jason's head snapped up at the sound. His eyes, searching the crowd, locked on Barron. He stopped mid-stride, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief, hope, and overwhelming joy. Barron. His voice carried across the noisy terminal. What happened next would later be described by airport staff as the most beautiful thing we've ever seen in arrivals. Barron, the dignified, restrained service dog, broke protocol completely. With a joyful bark that echoed through the terminal, he bolted toward Jason, weaving expertly through startled travelers. Jason dropped to one knee, abandoning a crutch as Barron reached him. Man and dog collided in a reunion of pure, unfiltered emotion, Barron whining and wiggling, trying to press every part of himself against his long-lost partner, while Jason buried his face in the dog's fur, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. My boy, they heard him murmur. My good, brave boy. Martha felt Jennifer's hand slip into hers. Well, her daughter said softly, I guess that answers the question of whether he's really Barron's handler. Travelers stopped to watch the reunion, many discreetly wiping away tears. By the time Martha, Abby, and Jennifer approached, Jason had composed himself somewhat, though his eyes remained red-rimmed. Mrs. Winters, he said, struggling to stand. Martha, please. She extended her hand, which he shook firmly. And this is my daughter Jennifer and my granddaughter Abby. Thank you, Jason said simply. For everything. The awkward formality of introductions dissolved as Barron continued to divide his attention between Jason and Martha, clearly delighted to have both his humans together. He looks amazing, Jason observed as they made their way to the parking area. When I last saw him, he was showing his age. You've given him new life. More accurately, he's given me new life, Martha replied. During the drive back to Mapleton, Jason shared more details about his recovery and his negotiations with the FEMA training program. They've approved my proposal to establish a satellite training facility in Burlington, focusing on senior handlers and wilderness rescue techniques specific to the Northeast, he explained. I'll be working primarily as an instructor, with some administrative responsibilities. Senior handlers? Jennifer questioned. Jason nodded. One thing my accident taught me is that physical limitations don't diminish knowledge or effectiveness. Experienced handlers who can no longer handle the physical demands of field deployment still have invaluable skills to share. He glanced meaningfully at Martha. Age isn't disqualifying in this work. Wisdom often compensates for physical capability. Martha felt a warm rush of appreciation for this understanding. Throughout their video conversations, Jason had never once questioned her ability to care for Baron despite her age, a refreshing change from her children's constant concern. As they approached Mapleton, Jason grew visibly nervous. "I've been wondering about living arrangements," he admitted. "I don't want to disrupt Baron's routine with you, but I also hope to spend time with him." "We've been discussing that," Martha replied. "The apartment above my garage has been vacant since my tenant moved last year. It would need some modifications for accessibility, but my mother is offering you a place to live rent-free," Jennifer interjected bluntly. "Just to be clear about what's happening here, Jennifer," Martha admonished. "It's a fair clarification," Jason said, "and I appreciate the directness. Mrs. Winters, Martha, I'm not looking for charity. I receive disability benefits and will have a salary from the training position. I can pay fair market rent. We can discuss details later," Martha said firmly. "For now, let's focus on this reunion." The welcome committee waiting at Martha's house took Jason by surprise. Chief Sanderson, several firefighters, the mayor, and a small crowd of neighbors had gathered in the front yard beneath a welcome home Jason and Baron banner. Baron, who normally shied away from crowds, pranced proudly between Jason and Martha as they approached, head high as if personally introducing his two favorite humans. "Word travels fast in small towns," Martha explained apologetically. Jason smiled. "I've missed that. Denver was lonely." The informal reception lasted well into the evening, with neighbors bringing potluck dishes and the volunteer firefighters grilling in Martha's backyard. Through it all, Baron remained glued to Jason's side, occasionally checking back with Martha, as if ensuring she was still nearby. As sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Martha found Jason sitting quietly on her porch swing, watching Baron greet well-wishers. "It's been overwhelming, hasn't it?" she asked, settling beside him. "In the best possible way," he assured her. "I never expected such a welcome." Martha studied his profile, the strong jawline, the premature silver at his temples, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both pain and resilience. "Baron chose well when he found you," Jason said softly. "I won't disrupt that bond." "And I won't disrupt yours," Martha replied. "He needs both of us, I think. Just as Mapleton needs both of us." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "Partners, then? In giving Baron his third chapter?" Martha extended her hand. "Partners." As they shook on their unusual arrangement, Baron trotted up the porch steps and flopped contentedly between them, his sigh of happiness requiring no translation. The transformation of the old storage building behind the fire station progressed rapidly through the autumn months. What had once been a neglected space filled with outdated equipment and forgotten paperwork became Baron's Buddy's Animal Rehabilitation Center, its fresh white siding and royal blue trim visible from Main Street. Martha observed the changes from her regular spot on a bench across the street, Baron at her feet and a clipboard in her lap. At 78, she never expected to be overseeing construction projects or managing volunteer schedules, yet here she was, deep into what her granddaughter Abby called her third act. "The kennel dividers are being delivered tomorrow," Jason reported, maneuvering himself onto the bench beside her. His mobility had improved dramatically in the 2 months since his arrival in Mapleton. The crutches had been replaced by a single walking cane, which he often forgot at home, and the vet equipment donation from Burlington Animal Hospital cleared inspection. Martha nodded approvingly. "The volunteer orientation is Saturday morning. We already have 15 confirmed attendees." Their casual conversation masked a deeper significance. These daily planning sessions had evolved into a comfortable routine for them, establishing the rhythm of their unusual partnership. The early awkwardness had gradually given way to mutual respect and genuine friendship. Jason's transition into the apartment above Martha's garage had gone more smoothly than any of them had anticipated. Jennifer's concerns about a strange man living on her mother's property had dissolved after she'd witnessed Jason's unfailing respect for Martha's boundaries and his genuine gratitude for her role in Baron's life. Baron, meanwhile, had blossomed in ways Martha hadn't thought possible. The solemn, dignified dog who had entered her life 4 months earlier now played fetch in the backyard, performed impressive tricks for neighborhood children, and occasionally even indulged in what Jason called zoom eyes, bursts of joyful running that belied his senior status. Their shared custody arrangement had evolved naturally. Barron slept in Martha's house, but spent days with Jason at the developing shelter facility. In the evenings, they often gathered in Martha's kitchen for dinner, sharing stories and plans while Barron dozed contentedly between them. Chief Sanderson called this morning, Jason mentioned, his tone deliberately casual. There's a missing hiker situation developing in the National Forest. College student who wandered off the main trail yesterday afternoon. They've asked if Barron might assist. Martha's heart raced with both concern and pride. Is he ready for field work again? Are you? Jason nodded. Physically, I can manage the command center operations. I wouldn't be hiking difficult terrain. And Barron, he glanced down at the dog who had perked up at the change in conversation tone. He's been consistently sharp in our training sessions. This is what he was born to do, Martha. Martha had witnessed these training sessions. Jason working with Barron in a sectioned-off area behind the shelter, hiding training scent articles, and giving commands in German. Barron's transformation during these exercises was remarkable. Years seemed to fall away as he focused with laser precision on his tasks. What time do they need us? Martha asked simply. Jason's eyebrows rose. Us? Of course. We're partners, aren't we? Besides, if you think I'm letting Barron go on his first official mission without me, you haven't been paying attention these past months. 2 hours later, Martha found herself at the Green Mountain National Forest Ranger Station, surrounded by search and rescue personnel and volunteers. The situation was increasingly serious. Temperatures were dropping, and the missing student, Ellie Winters, no relation, was only wearing a light jacket and had no overnight gear. Chief Sanderson briefed the assembled team. We've covered the main trails and obvious areas. Now we need specialized skills to check the ravines and densely wooded sections. He gestured to Jason, who stood beside the search coordinator's map table. Jason Miller, formerly with FEMA Urban Search and Rescue, will be coordinating our K-9 resources. Jason stepped forward with a confidence Martha hadn't fully witnessed before. This was Jason in his element, the skilled professional rather than the recovering patient. Barron will be working the eastern quadrant where the terrain is too steep for the ATVs, he explained, pointing to the map. Mrs. Winters and I will be handling him as a team, with support from Rangers Davis and Schmidt. There were a few skeptical glances at Martha, her sensible walking shoes and gray hair marking her as an unlikely search and rescue participant, but no one voiced objections. Barron's reputation had preceded him, and Jason's credentials were unimpeachable. As they prepared to deploy, loading into Forest Service vehicles, Martha felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Jennifer standing behind her, expression tight with worry. Mom? Abby called and told me what's happening. What are you thinking? It's near freezing out there. A young woman is missing, Martha replied simply. Barron can help find her. But you don't need to go. Let Jason handle it. I'm not climbing mountains, Jennifer. I'll be staying with the command vehicle. But Barron works better with both of us there. And frankly, I can't sit at home waiting for news. I need to be present. Jennifer studied her mother's determined expression and sighed in resignation. You've changed, Mom. No, Martha corrected gently. I've remembered who I am. There's a difference. At the trailhead, Ranger Davis provided Martha with a Forestry Service jacket and a handheld radio. Jason prepared Barron, checking his special booties designed to protect his paws from sharp rocks and ice, and securing his bright orange search vest. Mrs. Winters will be our radio operator, Jason explained to the team. She'll maintain communication between our group and base while Barron and I work the search pattern. Martha accepted the radio with steady hands, recognizing Jason's thoughtful compromise, giving her a crucial role that respected her limitations while allowing her to be part of the mission. The search itself was methodical and initially disheartening. For 2 hours, Barron worked the designated area, nose to the ground, occasionally looking back at Jason for direction. The temperature continued to drop as afternoon faded toward evening. Martha kept meticulous notes of their search patterns, maintaining regular radio contact with base camp. We should consider returning to base before darkness falls, Ranger Schmidt suggested as the shadows lengthened. We can resume at first light. Jason looked to Martha, who was studying Barron's body language. Throughout the search, she had become increasingly attuned to his subtle cues, the tension in his shoulders, the tilt of his ears, the rhythm of his breathing. "He's picking up something," she said with certainty. "See how he keeps returning to that eastern ridgeline? He's catching intermittent scent." Jason nodded in agreement. "The wind patterns in these valleys are tricky. Let's try one more pass along the upper trail with the wind at our backs." The decision proved critical. 20 minutes later, Barron's demeanor changed dramatically. His movements became more focused, his tail held high with intensity. Suddenly, he pressed his front paws into the ground 3 times and gave a single, sharp bark, the unique alert Jason had described months ago. "He's found something," Jason called. Barron led them off the trail and down a steep embankment toward a rocky outcrop. There, wedged between boulders and nearly invisible from above, lay Ellie Winters, conscious but hypothermic, her ankle badly sprained. "I slipped," she explained through chattering teeth as Ranger Davis provided emergency blankets and Schmidt radioed for a medical evacuation team. "I thought I could climb back up, but it was too steep." "How did you find me?" "I couldn't hear anyone calling." Martha watched as Barron stationed himself protectively beside the young woman, providing warmth while the Rangers prepared a temporary shelter. Jason caught her eye across the small clearing, his expression a mixture of pride and vindication. Back at base camp, as Ellie was loaded into an ambulance, the search coordinator approached them. "Impressive work. We've been trying to secure funding for a K-9 unit for years. Seeing this outcome might finally convince the county commissioners." Later that night, exhausted but exhilarated, Martha sat on her porch swing watching the stars appear. Barron lay at her feet, occasionally accepting gentle ear scratches, while Jason sat beside her, his walking cane forgotten inside. "You were remarkable today," Jason said softly. "The way you read Barron's signals, maintain communications, you're a natural." Martha smiled. "Not bad for a retired librarian." "Age is just a number," Jason repeated his earlier sentiment. "Purpose doesn't expire." "Purpose," Martha mused. "That's what he gave me, isn't it? Not just companionship, but meaning." Barron raised his head at their quiet conversation, eyes moving between his 2 humans with contentment. In the warm porch light, Martha could almost imagine his expression was a smile. "The shelter opens officially next week," Jason reminded her. "Our first 2 residents arrive Tuesday. The retired police K-9 from Burlington and that therapy horse from the closed children's program." Martha nodded. "Barron's buddies. Real second chances." She reached down to stroke Barron's head. "All because you were crying in the rain that Sunday morning." Barron sighed contentedly in response, a sound that, to Martha's ears, contained all the wisdom and forgiveness a dog's heart could hold. The spring sunshine bathed Mapleton's town square in golden light as Martha adjusted the ribbon on Barron's special ceremony collar. 18 months had passed since that rainy Sunday morning when she'd found him tied to an abandoned gas station post. 18 months of profound transformation for them both. "Hold still, you handsome boy," she murmured, smoothing his now glossy coat. Age had whitened his muzzle further, but proper nutrition and regular exercise had restored much of his vitality. "It's not every day you get to be the guest of honor." The occasion was the official opening ceremony for the expanded Barron's Buddies Rehabilitation Center. No longer just a renovated storage building, but now a proper facility with indoor training areas, specialized medical equipment, and housing for both animals and visiting handlers. What had begun as a small local initiative had grown into a regional resource for retired service animals, drawing support from across New England. "Are you 2 ready?" Jason called from the porch steps. "The mayor's already texting me." Martha smiled at the sight of him. Gone were the crutches and uncertainty of a year ago. Though he still walked with a slight limp that would never fully disappear, Jason moved with confidence, his body strengthened by daily physical therapy and work with the animals. The haunted look that had initially shadowed his eyes had been replaced by purpose and contentment. "Just making sure he looks presentable," Martha replied, giving Barron a final pat. "We can't have our namesake looking shabby." The past year had settled them into a comfortable routine that still occasionally surprised Martha when she reflected on it. Jason had become an integral part of her life, not in the romantic way that town gossips had initially speculated, but as family in the truest sense. He joined her for Sunday dinners, accompanied her to community events, and spent holidays with her increasingly accepting children and grandchildren. Baron, of course, remained their heart's center, the bridge that had connected their disparate worlds and continued to bind them together in an arrangement that defied conventional explanation but worked beautifully in practice. "Grandma, Jason, hurry up," Abby called from the sidewalk, her once blue hair now a professional shade of auburn as she completed her final year of veterinary school. The shelter had become her primary clinical rotation site, her research on service animal retirement protocols drawing attention from major veterinary journals. The town square had been transformed for the ceremony. Rows of chairs faced a small stage draped with red, white, and blue bunting. Posters displayed before and after photos of the 28 animals the shelter had successfully rehabilitated and rehomed over the past year. A special exhibit highlighted Baron's story, from his FEMA deployments through his abandonment to his new life as both beloved pet and working therapy dog. As Martha, Jason, and Baron made their way through the gathering crowd, they were stopped repeatedly by well-wishers. Children asked to pet Baron. Seniors shared stories of how the shelter's therapy program had helped them, and several uniformed handlers from regional K-9 units came to pay their respects. "There's our heroes," Chief Sanderson called, waving them toward the front row. "We saved you seats." Martha felt a flutter of nervousness as she spotted the program listing her as one of the main speakers. Public speaking had never been her forte, but Baron's story had gradually helped her overcome that fear. She'd become the shelter's most effective ambassador, her quiet dignity and obvious devotion to Baron resonating with potential donors and volunteers alike. The ceremony began with the mayor's predictably long-winded introduction, followed by Chief Sanderson highlighting the 4 successful search and rescue missions Baron had participated in over the past year. Each presentation emphasized the impact of second chances, not just for the animals, but for the community itself. When it was Jason's turn to speak, he surprised everyone by abandoning the podium and instead kneeling beside Baron in front of the crowd. 18 months ago, I was in a Colorado rehabilitation center, believing I'd lost everything that mattered: my career, my mobility, and most painfully, my partner. He placed his hand gently on Baron's head. I didn't know then that a remarkable woman in Vermont would find him tied to a post in the rain and recognize something special in his eyes. Martha blinked back tears as Jason continued. Mrs. Martha Winters could have walked past. She could have called animal control. She could have done the sensible thing and continued to church. Instead, she listened to her heart and brought home a dog she knew nothing about. Jason's voice caught slightly. In doing so, she not only saved Baron, but created a ripple effect that has touched hundreds of lives in this community. The crowd applauded as Jason gestured for Martha to join them. Baron immediately repositioned himself between them, his preferred spot. "Together, we've created something meaningful," Jason concluded. "Not just a shelter, but a philosophy. That loyalty deserves loyalty in return, that service deserves recognition, and that it's never too late for a new chapter." When Martha's turn came, she spoke without notes, her librarian's voice carrying clearly across the square. "I've been asked many times what possessed me to adopt a large, unknown dog at my age." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. "The truth is simple. I recognized myself in his eyes that morning. We were both alone, both grieving losses, both uncertain of our purpose. In helping him, I found my own way forward." She looked out at the gathered faces, her daughter Jennifer, who had finally stopped worrying quite so much, Abby, whose career path had been solidified by her work with Baron, Chief Sanderson, whose department now boasted 3 certified K-9 teams, the seniors from the community center who participated in weekly therapy sessions with the shelter animals. "Baron taught me that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story," Martha continued. "It can be the beginning of something new and unexpected. He showed me that even in our final chapters, we can still have adventure, purpose, and profound connection." As if on cue, Baron pressed against her leg supportively. "Most importantly," Martha concluded, "Baron reminded all of us that sometimes the things we rescue end up rescuing us in return." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a bronze plaque for the new training facility, bearing an engraving of Baron's profile and the shelter's motto: "Second chances, second lives." Children released biodegradable balloons printed with the names of service animals who had passed away after distinguished careers, As the crowd dispersed toward the reception area, Martha found herself approached by a familiar face, Ruth Simmons, the hospital volunteer who had first told her about Jason's accident. "Martha, there's someone here who's been waiting to meet you," Ruth said, gesturing to a distinguished-looking man in his 60s standing nearby. "This is Dr. Lawrence Miller, Jason's father. He flew in from California for the ceremony." Martha extended her hand, immediately recognizing Jason's warm eyes in the older man's face. "Dr. Miller, what a pleasure." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Winters. I've heard so much about you." His voice held genuine emotion. "Thank you for what you've done for my son. After his accident, I feared he'd never find his way back to himself. You and Baron gave him that chance." "We helped each other," Martha replied simply. As evening fell, the celebration moved to Martha's backyard, where tables had been set up beneath strands of twinkling lights. Jennifer and Michael had prepared a feast, while Abby's boyfriend played guitar softly in the background. The gathering included an unlikely mix: firefighters and librarians, veterinarians and seniors, all connected through the improbable story that had begun in the rain. Martha slipped away from the festivities for a moment, stepping onto her front porch for a quiet breath. Baron, ever vigilant, followed her. In the gentle spring twilight, she sat on the porch swing where she'd spent so many peaceful evenings with her unusual family. Baron rested his head on her lap, his amber eyes, still bright despite his advancing years, gazing up at her with unmistakable contentment. "We did good, didn't we?" she whispered, stroking his ears. The sound of laughter drifted from the backyard, Jason telling stories, Jennifer's distinctive chuckle, the deeper tones of Chief Sanderson and his crew. From abandoned souls to the center of a vibrant community, they had traveled an unlikely path together. Martha thought about the frightened, rain-soaked dog she'd found that Sunday morning and the lonely widow she had been. Neither of them could have imagined the journey ahead, the lives they would touch, the community they would build, the purpose they would discover together. Baron sighed contentedly against her legs as Martha gently rocked the swing, savoring the moment. Behind them, the door opened as Jason stepped onto the porch. "Everyone's wondering where the guests of honor disappeared to," he said with a smile. "Just taking a moment," Martha replied, "thinking about beginnings and endings." Jason nodded in understanding, settling beside her on the swing. Baron adjusted his position to maintain contact with both of them. "Always the bridge, the connector. Not an ending," Jason corrected gently. "A middle. We've still got plenty of story left to write." As if to confirm this, Baron thumped his tail against the porch boards. Once, twice, 3 times, his own form of applause for the chapters yet to come. Martha smiled at the gesture and the profound truth it contained. What had begun with a dog's quiet weeping in the rain had become a symphony of second chances, not just for Baron, not just for Martha and Jason, but for an entire community that had remembered how to listen to those who suffer in silence. "You're right," she agreed, rising from the swing. "Let's get back to our guests. After all, we have plans to make for tomorrow." Together, the unlikely family, elderly librarian, injured firefighter, and loyal dog, walked back toward the light and laughter, each step a testament to resilience, purpose, and the extraordinary power of compassion. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you've watched this far, comment, "I watched all the way through," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears in the end screen. It's going to be very emotional.